Thank you again to all of our sponsors that helped make this conference possible. Thank you for joining us. I see we're swelling up to over 100 people at the moment. We are going to kick off our panel. It's an amazing lineup today about talking about bargaining for our future, taking on Amazon. I'm going to play a video now, but just a reminder in case you joined us after I said, if you're stuck on seeing just the video screen, you control that. There at the bottom of the screen, there's a toggle. You can go from something that looks like a circle, like a pie, just slide it over to the people, and you'll be able to see the panelists after the video. Join us now as we start to watch our next video on taking on Amazon. So excited to see this panel take place. I want to introduce you to our moderator, Jobs with Justice Organizing Director, Nafisa Ullah. Nafisa, please join us.
Hey everyone, it's a joy to be here for National Conference Virtual Edition, first ever. Thanks for joining us for day 2, and thanks for joining this super timely and critical panel about Amazon. To get started, I just want to remind us about some of the stuff we talked about yesterday. If you were able to join us for the day 1 of the conference, we had some powerhouse speakers. We had Mary Kay Henry and Smiley open up the day with a whole group of strikers. We had Stacey Davis Gates from the Chicago Teachers Union. We had Elisa McBride from AFSCME, all telling us different ways that people are taking back our power and fighting in this moment. But even though we had all those really amazing, wonderful people, I found myself really missing you, like all of you that I don't get to hang out with, that we didn't get to cheer on our strikers. We didn't get to shout and applaud at Smiley. And so we're going to treat this plenary like we're in person. All right. Like, I want y'all to hiss when we talk about Bezos as well. We can't hear you, but we'll feel you. I want you to applaud when we're excited about stuff. If you have kids, I want them to be super confused. If you have partners and roommates, I want them to be really jealous that they're not at this conference with us. So we can feel a little bit of the love that we don't get to feel in person when we pop out of a workshop and say, that really hit me in the right spot. I didn't quite understand this, so that we get a little bit of the vibe. Okay. It's impossible to tee up an Amazon plenary. It's so dynamic. The stuff that's moving is epic. They're literally the biggest existential threat to our economy, to our democracy. And we're seeing every single day both wins and losses on the corporate battlefield. So I'm not going to give too much of an introduction, other than we're going to talk about how one of the fundamental pieces of winning in the structure of Amazon is to take back our power and expand our ability to govern the beast. So to start us off, I'm just going to have each of our excellent panelists introduce themselves. Before that, we're going to do a quick poll.
Right.
Super quick poll. Jessica's going to explain.
Right. So you'll see it on your screen now. Is to the right. Our question poll today is, how many of you have interacted with Amazon this month? Please just submit your answer on your screen to the right. We have yes, no, I didn't have a choice, or I protested them. So let us know, hit the button, hit submit, and we'll get that answer in just a moment. All right, answers are coming in. We have, all right, I love it. We have, whoop, still coming. About 44% of you have actually, you'll see the results on the screen yourselves, have said yes. 21% of you are at a solid no. 15% didn't have a choice. Many of us are in that situation, and we'll be talking about that during the panel. And an awesome 20% of us protested them. And you could select multiple answers, so hopefully some of us did buy and protest at the same time. Back to you, Nafisa.
Thanks, Jessica. That's exactly right. It's we want to talk about the ability to have choice and the ability to and the necessity to campaign differently in this moment when you don't have a choice but to use a service. This is interesting because those of us that said no may not know all of the things that Amazon owns and all the ways we've interacted with Amazon because they're such a behemoth. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and some of you may have talked about that yesterday at the Amazon workshop. But to start us off, let's introduce our panelists. What I'll do is just kick it to each of them, starting with Straya Sanchez, coming to us from Colorado. Straya, tell us who you are, what you're up to, and how you came to the Amazon fight.
Hi, so I am Straya. I work for Respect. I am a former Amazon for 2, and just seeing what this is going on at Amazon got me involved in speaking out, and then I touched base with United for Respect and realized I wasn't alone. So now we're doing a lot of work around the COVID situation and trying to get better working conditions for employees.
Excellent. Thanks, Straya. And Maritza, tell us about you.
Excellent. Thanks, Straya.
Hi, everybody. And hi, Nafisa. Thanks for that warm introduction. So my name is Maritza Silva Farrell. I am an executive director at Align. Align is an organization that builds coalitions between community and labor here in New York City. And one of the campaigns that we began taking on back in 2017 was around the efforts of Amazon on expanding their headquarters across different cities and states. And here in New York City, we had a big fight. So I'll be talking a little bit about that and the work that we're doing right now.
Excellent. And Ryan, and I should say to everyone that we were supposed to have Danya Rajendra who's the director of the Athena Coalition. She's feeling super unwell, and so Ryan really at the last possible second stepped in to save the day, which is kind of what all of our leaders do. They step in when there's an opportunity and a need and help us out. So thanks, Ryan, for being here and having our backs and making sure that we can continue the conversation. Who are you? What piece of Amazon are you taking up?
Great. Thanks, Nafisa, and morning, everyone. Happy to jump in at the last minute. My name's Ryan Garrity. I coordinate the surveillance table at Athena. And the piece that we take on is looking at the way that Amazon is building technologies and partnerships that increase mass incarceration, support the detention and deportation of immigrants, and fuel surveillance of their workers. And together with Media Justice, Empower, Coworker, Acre, Demand Progress, and a number of other movement partners, that's the piece of Amazon that we're taking on.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Mariah, for you. You're still on mute, wonderful.
Sorry, misclick there. Thanks, Nafisa. Hi, everybody. I'm Mariah Montgomery. I am a campaign director at the Partnership for Working Families. We're a network of community labor coalitions, including Align, which is also part of Jobs with Justice, in 20 metro regions around the country, organizing around worker power, a healthy climate, racial justice, and democracy at the city and sort of metro region level. And over the last couple of years, it's evolved where parts of our network are taking Amazon on it across a number of from working conditions, environmental impact, surveillance of immigrants, and local democracy, which I'll talk about more later. So all of it.
Awesome. I can't wait to get deeper into conversation with all of you. Pause for applause for the panelists because you're all applauding very loudly at home. Good. Making roommates jealous, making children confused. Good. Drea, we're going to start with you. Tell us what it was like to work in an Amazon warehouse. And how did you, it doesn't, the reason why you're a leader, obviously, is because it doesn't come naturally to most of us to come together. Folks in this plenary at Jobs with Justice, it does come, it's something we do and we believe in, but it doesn't come naturally to everyone. So tell us about what it was like to work there and how you came together with folks.
Okay, so I had applied at Amazon. I'd been a stay-at-home 18 years, 16 years, something like that. It was back into the workforce, and I was pretty excited because Amazon is a great big company, and I just thought that there was some opportunities there. So when I applied and was hired, I helped open up the Den 2 warehouse that's out here in Colorado, and I went in full of high hopes and loved it. Working there was a lot of favoritism. I watched a lot of friend workers get fired unjustly. I'm not really sure if you guys can hear me. I'm going to keep going otherwise. We had safety issues there. I was almost crushed by 5 falling boxes, quite terrifying. People were getting written up for time off task, and unpaid time off there was just never, we didn't have paid sick leave. There was just a lot of issues going on there, and I got tired of dealing with all of it. I ended up starting to speak out, and I was speaking out online and with house, and it was hard because everybody really likes their jobs, or they were afraid to speak out against Amazon, and so it was a thing to do. And then I had filled out a petition, and she was very up on giving me a call and talking to me about issues. And as soon as her and I started speaking out about how things were going,
I think we lost her. That's all right. Hopefully she'll pop back in. This is the nature of virtual conference. Unlike any other conference you've ever been to, we had a panelist disappear midair. We'll let her finish when she joins. But Maritza, I'm gonna kick it to you next. You must be sick and tired of talking about winning. You're just winning nonstop. But can you take us back to your win with keeping Amazon out of New York City? It is not a small feat, and I don't think many of us thought it was possible to keep them from opening an HQ2 in New York City. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, for sure, Nafisa. Thank you. And I wish we were winning as much as, it looks like we're winning some. But I want to first start off by saying that the way we have been able to win many campaigns, including Amazon, it really happens when communities come together and when organizations and from labor, community groups, environmental justice groups, just really bond together around specific values as to what is really important to us. Specifically in this case, there were a series of groups that were engaged in this coalition. This was not only aligned, it helped organize and coordinate some of this coalition, but many folks from across the city who organize in neighborhoods in Queens particularly were deeply involved. Groups like CAV, DRUM, groups that are mostly led by immigrant communities and people of color, Make the Road New York Communities for Change, Empower, Jeffridge. So there was a series of groups specifically from neighborhoods that were engaged in this campaign. And on the side of labor, we have unions that supported this effort because of the importance of supporting workers and ensuring that workers' conditions will improve in this particular sector. So we have the Retail Wholesale Department Union, Teamsters engaged in this campaign in some level. So it really takes a whole village to be able to win this kind of campaign, specifically when we're talking about the biggest corporation in the world and the richest men in the world, right? So this was not an easy campaign. I would say, though, it was the shortest campaign I ever worked on. It took 4 months. I think none of us in the coalition ever thought that this was going to be the case. But I said that this was really in comparison to a David and Goliath fight. It was not a situation where we have all the resources in place to be able to move the work as we know Amazon and Jeff Bezos has. But yeah, so I think the main piece was that people really banded together and really to show that a greedy corporation owned by the richest men in the world cannot buy their influence into our city. So that was the premise of our campaign at the beginning. And you know, as folks might have followed, the thing that Jeff Bezos wanted to do and Amazon wanted to do was to get nearly $3 billion in subsidies to get in. And you probably read the headlines multiple times, but the issue wasn't that the only issue. There were more important issues around this, specifically around many practices by Amazon that clash with the values in our communities, as I mentioned earlier. Specifically, you know, the issues around ICE, the issues around how Amazon enables the deportation machine in the time when we see in this federal government deporting our families and separating our families. The refusal to respect employees' right to unionize, and ability for workers to be able to have safety in the workplace. Right now, with this current crisis, with this pandemic, we are seeing firsthand in different warehouses and different logistics that they manage, where workers are not protected. Workers are not right now receiving the safety necessary to be able to do their work. So they're really showing their true colors. And for us, those issues were really critical. Aside from that, New York has been faced with a lot of issues of gentrification. We have a huge housing crisis, and Amazon attempted to come into a neighborhood that was already being gentrified. Traffic and congestion were issues that also were really important to our communities. So a combination of all those things really allowed for this coalition to come together and for us to be able to fight back, engage all of the elected officials, including Congresswoman AOC and others who are all in the headlines, right? But the reality is that this fight, it wasn't led by elected officials. It was led by people of color and communities that were essentially have been, and they were at that moment getting a lot of resources getting extracted by corporations as we know it. So that was really what we did, and that's how we won, I would say. We actually built power, and building power is how it allowed for us to kick Amazon out of New York City in the way that we did. But also, I want to emphasize that this win wasn't only a win for New York or a win for our line or for the groups engaged. It was also a historic moment. This has not happened before. The withdrawal of headquarters for the biggest and largest corporation in the world was being seen globally. At the same time, the workers were striking in other parts of the world. So I think the moment when all of these things came together, it was critical for us to continue empowering our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, our states, our workers globally. And I think at this moment, particularly when we are in the middle of this crisis, I want to emphasize that the work that we're doing with the Athena Coalition, where we are building collaboration between organizations across the nation, it's really fundamentally critical for us to move some of these strategies. And I will end by sharing that, as we know, e-commerce is a sector that is pretty much needed. Right now, essential workers are sustaining us. Essential workers are the workers who are exposing themselves to this virus, and Amazon workers are there doing this so that we can actually access some of the goods and things that we need for the day-to-day. So it is really important to think about workers who for too long have been left to be considered the low-wage workers and the low-wage industry to be the invisible industry. So at this particular moment, we are organizing here in New York City. Many groups are engaging in organizing efforts to ensure that workers' voices are elevated and workers' demands are put first in this particular time, and in connection to the high levels of pollution and the environmental impact that Amazon is actually making here in New York City. The issue here is that, yes, we want, in the sense of getting Amazon out of New York City with their headquarters, but that didn't mean that Amazon didn't expand their efforts in New York City. We're seeing them expanding on their warehouses and logistics in neighborhoods that at this moment are considered to be environmental justice neighborhoods, where pollution, high levels of asthma are really important and happening every day. And now we have this big corporation taking a space in the same neighborhoods, polluting the neighborhoods even more so, and communities are coming together with different campaigns here in New York City to ensure that their demands are being taken care at this particular moment. I'll stop there, and thank you so much again for having us here. And again, I want to emphasize that the work that Jobs with Justice does nationally, the work that Partnership for Working Families does nationally is really important for us as one of the affiliates, and thank you for having me here.
No, thank you so much for sharing. The win of keeping Amazon out of New York City was so epic and inspirational to us all across the country, because we always know that we can know that when we come together we can win. Seeing us win against such an enormous corporation that, with all the odds stacked against us, run by the richest man in the world, so quickly, just like you said, it was a shot in the arm for all of us. I'll take this moment just to give a little shout out to the Awood Center, who was another, the first to bring Amazon to the table on anything with their workers in Minneapolis. The shout out particularly because they were also supposed to be on the panel originally when we were in March, but were unable to join today. And because they are the winners this year of the 44th annual Letelier Moffat Human Rights Award, from the Institute for Policy Studies, which is a huge deal, and big shout out to them in the world. Yes, you should be cheering at home, making noise. Ryan, I'm pausing both for applause and because you're the one that had the least notice for this section. You mentioned that you came to this work because of surveillance stuff, and then also a whole bunch of things around criminalization and policing brown and black bodies. Tell us more about that. I'm not sure all of us really understand in what ways Amazon, the platform on which we get to watch Mrs. Maisel and buy our stuff, has anything to do with criminalization. Tell us.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Amazon's model is really about dominating the internet and controlling the internet. That is how it started. So it wanted to dominate e-commerce as a platform. It controls much of internet infrastructure. It's moving devices into our homes. It's privatizing government computer infrastructure. And as part of that growth, like in corporations past, it uses that technology power as a means to control the people that this country has determined we need to control. We know here we invest disproportionately in the police, in immigration authorities, and in other ways of controlling poor people and brown and black people. Amazon is like fully been willing to use that predatory investment of the state to enrich itself. And so as it's thought about what kinds of technologies it wants to build and where it can have more profit, it's moved into policing, it's moved into immigration control, and it's built predatory control over its own lower wage workforce. And so that's meant developing facial recognition technology that civil rights groups have asked it to stop doing. Civil rights groups have asked them to stop selling face recognition to police departments, especially ones that have civil rights violations against their citizens, and Amazon has refused because there's profit there. They acquired Ring, which is a home camera network people put on their doors, and they've lobbied local police departments to engage in partnerships. So what that fuels is mass incarceration over extremely petty crimes like package theft, because they see it as a way into police departments entering into contract with Amazon Web Services, and they see it as a way to put additional surveillance devices in our homes. And similarly with immigration authorities, particularly this administration, but administrations past, invest a lot in surveilling immigrants and in immigration control. And Amazon saw that as an area where they could make a lot of money. And so they've become sort of a single vendor for cloud services for the Department of Homeland Security. And we see a very parallel practice happen in their workplace, where they're sort of at the vanguard of technologies and warehouses. And instead of using that to make warehouses more efficient, they use it to extract productivity out of their workers. They use it in a punitive way. They use it to ensure that workers will work at unsafe speeds, to threaten workers in case there's theft. And now we see it as a way to threaten organizers who are speaking up about health and safety violations. They've told workers that they'll follow them around on the cameras and see if they make any mistakes. So at every turn, it's sort of the same frame, where if there's an opportunity to make profit over controlling brown and black bodies and low-income people, that's where they move in.
That's despicable. Thank you for sharing. I hope there's lots of hissing going on at home. Not at Ryan, but at Bezos. Thanks, Ryan. Mariah, Partnership for Working Families got involved in this fight for a bunch of different reasons. I'm not actually sure which one you want to talk about. So I'm just going to kick it to you.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, so as I said at the top of the call, we work on a lot of different issues. And frankly, Amazon is a threat to everything we care about. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about HQ2 and then some stuff that's happening now, not as much about the New York case, but what I think it means for us in terms of particularly life in cities and our democracy. So, more than a year before Amazon announced it was going to put offices in New York, in Northern Virginia, and in Nashville, it announced its contest, determined where it would go. And this contest really flew in the face of what we know is good for our cities. It was, a company run by the world's richest man, which abuses workers and the planet and communities in general, as Straya and Maritza and Ryan have all described, pitting cities against each other to see who will offer it more money and more data about its residents in order to win a headquarters, which will then have its own negative impacts on the most vulnerable communities. And so in the process of organizing with partners like Jobs with Justice and Align and organizations in Northern Virginia like La Colectiva, to stop HQ2 giveaways and intervene in the process, I think this web of unique ways Amazon threatens the life of city dwellers and and threatens democracy in cities came into greater focus for us. So I'm not going to repeat all of the things that Straya and Maritza and Ryan have named about the way the company harms people. But I think that those all ultimately reduce our ability to participate in a true multiracial democracy together, because we are people are having to defend themselves on so many fronts constantly. And I do want to layer on this. I mean, Maritza mentioned the incentive in New York City, but I do want to sort of highlight that by not just not paying its taxes, but actually demanding payouts from public budgets that are funded by taxes other people like us do pay, the company threatens public services that we all need to be safe and healthy, which are an underpinning of any functional democracy. And then additionally, its business model relies on undercutting and controlling small businesses, which give our neighborhoods personality and life and are often places like ad hoc hubs for communities to share information and to get resources. I think we're all feeling that right now in this pandemic. People are really concerned about small businesses, and that, I think that throws it into perspective. There are all these interconnected impacts and threats, and of course, it all comes down ultimately to power. And I think that one way that the HQ2 search, not just the fight in New York, but the overall search illustrates this, is that Amazon ultimately chose the two most obvious locations in the end. So it did this national search, 238 cities threw their hat in the ring, and then it chose to go to the centers of financial and government power in the US, New York and DC. And so in retrospect, it seems clear, and shout out to Stacey Mitchell from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance on really making this case, that the search was more about making us all dance for our dinner and about gathering data about us in order to more effectively make money off of us than it was actually about choosing where to locate its offices. And I want to contrast that with, and on top of that, the company demands that our elected officials cut the public out of dealings that they're making on our behalf. So in the HQ2 process, elected officials were asked to sign NDAs. Actually, in the final meeting in Arlington County, Virginia, where officials voted to give Amazon millions of dollars, at some point they recessed the meeting and ordered the public out of the hearing room while Amazon executives recessed with county officials. It's a really clear example of how they sort of the dynamic that they demand. And it's not just HQ2. And to Maritza's point, they're expanding all of the time, and they bring these anti-democratic practices with them. So in San Bernardino, California, this week, it was announced that Amazon is taking on the lease at a major warehouse development at the airport in order to be able to do air freight. And the community in San Bernardino has been concerned since the development was announced that it will make the community sicker. The development has been coming for years, and the Inland Empire region already has the worst air quality in the country because of the giant network of warehouses and logistics that exists there. And certainly we're all thinking about respiratory health a lot right now and thinking about those people who already have compromised respiratory systems. And so the community has been trying to negotiate some kind of an agreement to mitigate the environmental risks of this development. And for years, local elected officials and Amazon have refused to confirm that this development is for Amazon. And this week, they finally confirmed it, and now email records show that elected officials have been anticipating Amazon's arrival at the airport for 2 years. And so, the organizing is ongoing, and the state attorney general is involved, and we're hopeful about what can still happen there. But it is such a huge struggle to hold this company accountable. And so while Amazon walked away in a certain way in New York, they're still growing there. They're still establishing offices in Northern Virginia and Nashville, and they're still building warehouses and logistics footprint all over the country. So ultimately for us, it's about the interconnection between these impacts and democracy, whether we get to have democracy. And certainly we're all very concerned about democracy right now for a number of reasons. But I think that so long as Amazon thinks that it can rule its workers, it thinks it can rule all of us. And so long as it can rule all of us, it will certainly rule its workers in warehouses and in other work environments. And we've seen since 2017 and the HQ2 search that people, from neighborhoods to city councils to Congress to warehouses to its own headquarters in Seattle are souring on this company's arrogance and overreach and efforts to dominate. And so, yes, clap, correct. But the pandemic is also a real opportunity for the company to consolidate its power. And we are under risk now of having vital infrastructure run by the world's first trillionaire. So we also, as a movement, need to accelerate our efforts and capture this growing sense that Amazon isn't just bad for workers, but in fact, all of the ways that it's harming us. And I think that if we work for it, there is a lot to be hopeful for.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Mariah. That leads really perfectly into a conversation about the monopoly that is Amazon, which Daniel was going to talk about, but since she's not well and not here, I will say a word about. But I want to give Straya a chance to finish up if you want to. We got most of your story about working with Amazon before you and your dog, whose name we did not catch, dropped off.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We love pets.
So, there was a lot of things going on there. We had a lot of write-ups for time off task, a lot of write-ups for people to make rate. Like if you were in the bottom 5% of people that made rate, you got a write-up. And it didn't matter if you were at 99.8, the bottom 5%, you got a write-up, which is, years of working, I have never, ever felt discriminated against female or for my age, and I felt it very much at Amazon. It was very clear that unless you were a young male, there was nowhere for you to go. And the cameras and the surveillance was absolutely where we were every minute, every day, and for we were there. I mean, every box, they knew what bin we were at, what aisle we were in. They could just access wherever we were at any point, at any day, for God knows how long. I don't know how long they kept records, but there's so much going on there that it was a very difficult place to work when you're feeling like you're being watched constantly, and when there's change. Having the fact that boxes had fallen on me and were constantly falling out of bins. I went to safety. I went to my manager. I went to the general manager of the building. I even connections questions people, which is supposed to be an advocate for employees. Nothing ever changed. I was basically told to get over it. So, I mean, it was a really hard place to work, and it that I knew that worked there whole mood a lot of the time, and it pitted people against each other. If Stone or Picker was in your because they knew they had to make rates, so it was really, and it took a lot out of you. I mean, 10 hours a day on your feet with very little time off. I mean, they're not a nice bunch, I'll tell you that.
I believe that.
Is there any questions I can
Yeah, we have a section at the end. Hopefully we'll get to it with some questions from the world writ large. I have a question for the larger panel, but first I'll just say that the stuff that Straya is describing, it fits so well with the way Amazon treats all of us, with complete disregard to our health, with complete disregard, not just disregard, but how aggressive disregard for the well-being of our entire communities. And Mariah had led us to this understanding that they're kind of everywhere. They're kind of everywhere, and they're too big. They're simply too big, with too broad of a reach. in too many places. And so one big part of the subtable within Athena and within the fight to take on Amazon is to figure out how to address the monopoly encompassed within. Ryan, do you want to take a stab at explaining to us what makes Amazon a monopoly?
So, I mean, Amazon's goal is really to control all aspects of both the supply chain and across internet infrastructure, all the way from the internet backbone to the small devices we purchase to put in our homes. And going back to creating their own products, to managing customers, to controlling last mile delivery, they want complete hold over all of those aspects. And that kind of vertical integration across multiple sectors, I don't think we've seen in another company before. And we're really just on the tip of the iceberg, because as they start dominating more areas of artificial intelligence by the vast amounts of particularly voice data that they're gathering in all of our homes and video data that they're gathering through their surveillance cameras, they will dominate those areas going forward for the next decades, and it will be very difficult for any smaller businesses or other tech companies to compete. And I think we haven't even begun to imagine what that's going to mean in terms of control of our lives and control of the future economy. And that's the way that Amazon's really become a monopoly in a different way than earlier phone companies or other large retailers like Walmart. It's really all of these pieces together that allows them to drive out small businesses, both in the technology economy, like open source developers that build for AWS that Amazon then excludes out, or small businesses on the retail platforms, or by driving UPS and most importantly USPS into the ground by maximizing this kind of gigafied, super unstable, low-paid workforce, so sort of across all of those layers.
Great. That's really helpful. And it tees up the question I have for all of you. So yesterday we spent a good amount of time talking about expanding bargaining, namely building other platforms and bridges to engage with economic relationships in our lives. How do you see our fights, plural, and our fight expansively with Amazon as a fight to expand bargaining and uphold democracy? And whoever goes first can go. Silence means
I could take a stab. So I've been thinking a lot about this, exactly for the reasons that Ryan just laid out. I think the overreaching and control of this corporation is like so massive that as organizers, we actually need to start thinking massive. We have to start thinking in different ways of organizing, because this is not an issue only about workers, as we are talking about, right? It's not only an issue about monopoly. It's not only an issue about the small business being affected or the environmental impact that this corporation brings into communities. It is an issue about democracy. It is an issue about what kind of lives do we want to have moving forward. And Amazon is really setting the standards. So we have to put a stop to it. So in order to think about the ways in which we can do this, and talking to some folks in the movement about ways in which we can think about this as a sectoral way of approaching the organizing efforts, right? Like one could be sectoral organizing that incorporates some of the demands that we've been talking about here today in terms of like what is the role of Amazon in terms of web services, right? Like they want to control all the government web services, right? Like what do we need to be doing around that? Specifically, but think about each of the pieces in a much more sectoral way. That's one. And the other piece is in the sense of, I think it was Mariah who mentioned that, Amazon feels like if they can control workers, they can control the entire world and can control everybody else. I think that's a so right statement, because that's where everything starts, right? So in terms of how do we bargain, I think it's important for us to thinking about different ways of bargaining, right? Like we have to make demands in terms of like if a warehouse or some kind of facility for Amazon is being built, the conditions have to come from the communities, right? Like it doesn't matter if there is subsidies or no subsidies, right? Like there has to be some interventions from the government where they have to put a stop from the start. So that's just an idea in terms of like how do we get even like the idea of organizing unions, like how unions are thinking about this. We are in a moment where we have to think about a 21st century, perhaps, labor movement that have to think a little bit more beyond the boundaries that we have today, where there is intersections. There are intersections incorporated into these bargaining conversations. That's not only about the wages and benefits, but it goes beyond. It's about our ways of lives, our ways of protecting our communities and our democracy.
That's awesome. Does anybody else want to respond to this question? After this next response, I'll invite Jessica back in because she has a bunch of questions from participants that will be very enlightening, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll just add that I just want to connect the dots on the monopoly issue and the need for new forms of bargaining, because I think that with a company like Amazon, what you see is like, unlike perhaps other big bad corporations that we have now or that we've had in the past, where the primary point of exploitation is at work, the primary point of economic domination is at work. I think with Amazon, what we have is lots of different places where they exploit and economically dominate people. And so it is in our interest as people who are being dominated by them, whether it's as consumers, as small businesses, as workers, to look for those common interests and use that collective power to win new systems. So.
Yeah, that's great. And it's also, I mean, I'm moderating, so I don't want to talk too much, but it's also really, Smiley said yesterday that this pandemic has laid bare the fissures that already existed in our economy and our society. And it's also laid bare what we can and can't do in terms of governance of big beasts. We know, a couple years ago when folks at J with J were talking about how Amazon's infrastructure and size and scale should be considered a utility, nobody really got it. And then now we're having the exact same conversation in a crisis moment with different implications. Like our understanding of our reliance on that infrastructure is totally different in this crisis than it was a few years ago. And so our opportunity to govern a beast like this both is critical and like it's an existential crisis. We have to, on the one hand. And on the other hand, something about this moment has laid bare the necessity in a way that we were struggling to do a few years ago. And it's unfortunate that it's taken so much pain and crisis to do that. But there is this moment of power that is coming from all of your comments. But I'll get off my soapbox and see, Jessica, you want to bring us some good questions from the crew?
Excellent. Yeah, some of them have been answered, but we're going to go through. We've had a lot of activity, so you can keep populating your questions in and upvote. Our first question is, can the panel talk about Amazon's influence over the United States Postal Service that's been in the news recently?
Who wants it? Read us another one, Jessica. We'll see if we can, loop a few together.
Our next one. We did say that Amazon's culture of surveillance is actually terrifying. What are some ways that we can organize issues around surveillance in the workplace?
So I'll take that one to start, and Straya, if you want to jump in, that would be great. When thinking about surveillance in the workplace is sort of the least governed, least controlled environment. In the public space, we have too few regulations around surveillance, and especially around privatized surveillance. In the workplace, it's like the Wild West, where corporations can experiment with new types of technology, with new types of control that then can be deployed in the public arena. And workers have really very few rights. Only in workplaces where people have collective bargaining have you seen workers be able to make demands around what kind of data can be collected for what reasons. In workplaces like Amazon, there's very little power. And I think where we need to look, especially now, is federal and state legislation to control the use of biometric surveillance, to control the use of unaccountable, potentially biased algorithms in the workplace. And we need to ensure that workers can make deals with the company that are in the workers' best interest. Unless workers have real power in the workplace, then we have to have federal and state legislation, because otherwise it's always going to follow this predatory pattern that maximizes profit.
Thank you, Ryan. And Straya, that sort of goes on a question. There was a question in here on, did you know of any organizing efforts in your own workplace?
So all of the organizing efforts in my place were done by me and a couple people that I happen to know. We were always trying to up and say something and join us in our organizing efforts. And like I said, it wasn't easy. Nobody wanted to talk out about Amazon. And I think like the surveillance piece there, they know they're being watched and they're very scared to say or do anything that could cost them their job. You know, it's just such a mess. And the whole instance with the fact that employees are being surveilled, I mean, like, what choice do we have? You either quit or you deal with the surveillance. And so after I had done a conference with Roar about surveillance, but I don't really know how to go about preventing that or changing it up in the workplace at this point. But yeah, it's a big issue, and I really don't know how to fix it. And so yeah, I guess that's what I got.
Well, it's big. No one has the solution individually, but I will share that there is a workshop later today. If you're interested in talking about this, I'm not sure exactly the title, but it has the word datafication in it. Datafication. So go to that workshop if you want to talk more about organized surveillance and datafication.
You. Yeah, thank you, Straya. Yeah, thank you for the organizing work you have done. Yeah. Another question, we have one last one. About when we did the interactive poll, about 21% people said no, they didn't interact. Someone raised the question, how are people avoiding Amazon ASW services, which is the data housing? I think we've kind of touched upon that a bit in this panel, that there's so many aspects that Amazon's involved in our lives, but if someone would like to sort of figure that out, or you can answer it in the chat. If you are someone who's figured out how to get around AWS, please put it in as a question and just put answer and let us all know what you're doing. But if there are any suggestions from the panel, that's one of our last questions.
Something I would say about this is that the point of, or sort of like the fact that they're a monopoly makes it incredibly difficult for anyone to actually avoid using Amazon, particularly in a time when it is not safe to go outside. So I think it's been an important point for Athena that we don't think the solution is an individual action. You know, what we need is government action and collective action from community and workers. And so that said, I mean, and part of it is that there's this trick, right? Because so much of the internet is run on Amazon Web Services. You don't even know when you're interacting with Amazon or relying on Amazon most of the time. So, but I do think that, you know, there are increasingly people, especially in this moment, as the conditions in the warehouses are becoming better and better known, there are people creating resources to point folks to other ways of consuming, if that's something that is an option for you and that you're interested in. And maybe I don't know if there are ways to share resources after the conference, but I know that there have been lists collected of that sort of thing. There's also, going back to old school Amazon when it was a bookstore, there's a new online book seller called Bookshop, I think, that deals directly with independent book stores and is supporting them in particular in this time of shutdown. So there are some alternatives, but I think, there is no ethical consumption under Amazon. So I don't know if others have particular ideas.
Yeah, I was just going to add something. I mean, definitely echo what Mariah just said. Very difficult to avoid them, right? You go through the streamline of movies that you want to watch with your kid, and it's like Amazon Prime is right. I mean, it's almost impossible to avoid them. But I do want to touch on something that we've heard from workers during this crisis that I'd like to just emphasize and ask for folks who are in the audience today to be thoughtful about. I myself, sometimes tell my partner, hey, make sure that what we're ordering is essential, right? Because if it's not essential, just not, we don't need it, right? So I think be mindful in terms of like workers are risking their lives to be able to provide the services. And if you are and you need to order something because it's necessary for your life, be thoughtful about it and don't order things that are not necessarily as essential as we might think. That would be my only thought on this topic. Workers have been talking a lot about this, and that would be the best way to be in solidarity.
Thank you, Maritza. Nafisa, we're just about time. We want to make sure we give people a break before the workshop so we can wrap up. That would be great. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the question and answers.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, panelists. Before you run away, participants, I know you're at the computer. I know you've made a ton of noise during the course of this excellent, excellent panel. But now I would like for you to open your calendars. I'll wait. Do it. Grab your mouse or your phone, open your calendar. Good. The rest of the day is booked with this conference. Now look at next Friday and make an event. Do it. I can see Maritza and Mariah doing it. Do it. Are you doing it? Good. Make an event now in all caps, write, figure out what action you're taking for the AGM. What is the AGM? The AGM is Amazon's shareholder meeting on the 27th, which is the following week. So I'm giving you time. There are lots of different, the reason why there's not a specific ask I'm putting here is because it's going to be different depending on where you are and who you are and what kind of action you want to take. But if you would like guidance, you can go to bit.ly dot scrolling, finding. So bit.ly/AMZN527. If you put your information in there, Athena will help you figure out what your action should be for the AGM, for the shareholder meeting. But either way, now you have in your calendar for next Friday to figure out what action you're taking on Amazon. If you're so enraged right now, tweet whatever you want at Amazon or at Jeff Bezos right now, particularly about unpaid time off and safe working conditions. Great. That's all. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Just to